Let me give you 2 minutes on me, and then we'll just throw questions. So I grew up in Essex. So I built my first company when I was in high school. So landscaping company. So it's really all it was. But as a high school senior, I have 50 some employees. I wound up selling that company the week after I graduated high school, a couple weeks before I left for West Point, for about $250,000. And went to West Point, spent a year there, decided I missed being an entrepreneur, left, and ran for the state legislature in 1994. Met a guy at a loser's party, and we started a web development shop in 1994. Good time to do that. Built it, sold it, built a company you won't know, but a company called Spinbox, which if you're familiar with DoubleClick, do you know DoubleClick? Yeah. So anyway, we built it. It was the third largest ad network in the world in the mid-90s. So had a really big exit from that. Built another internet startup at the end of the 90s. That all dovetailed to me becoming an angel investor before we called it angel investing. Mostly we called it suicide back then. And then met a guy named Chris Ye, who was a West Coast guy. We became friends and started Wasabi in 2003. The real goal of Wasabi was to bet on early stage companies with a very unique model. About a third of the deals that we wind up doing, we're more co-founder than just investor. We literally will find somebody we like and build the company from scratch, providing all of the funding all the way through a price day round, no matter how long that takes. It's a very unique model. So we've done about 200 startups since 2003, so we're fairly active. We're on both coasts. Hey, come on in. The water's fine. We're just having chit chat here. It's not your formal description. No, I live outside. I live in New Hampshire, but so we have Boston, Baltimore. We now have a place in Scottsdale, and then we also have an office in San Mateo. So we're kind of a little bit everywhere. So anyway, that's us and what we do. That's it. So welcome to the party, guys. Thanks for coming. It's Friday. You must have something more fun to do, but I am happy you're gracing me with your presence here. So it is, we are officially 20 minutes into this excitement. And really, we have broken down from any kind of formal discussion because the crowd has overwhelmed us. So really what we're going to do is we're going to just talk about anything startup-ish that you'd like to talk about. So tell me your story. Who are you?
My name is Malachi, and
Malachi.
I'm a programmer here.
Okay.
This is my first semester, and I have done like 2 years of programming while I was in high school.
While you were in high school, where'd you go to high school?
Kenowa Hills, it's in Michigan.
In Michigan. Okay. Malachi. What's your name?
My name is Blaze.
Blaze.
Yep.
Holy macaroni. You don't run into many freaking Blazes. I love that. Tell me the story, Blaze.
I'm from a small county in
Kentucky.
McLean
McLean
County.
County, which is actually, that's close to Lexington, right? Isn't it close to Lexington?
About 3 hours away.
Is it that far? Okay.
3 hours west.
Oh, okay. All right.
This is my first year here. I'm in
Game
game programming.
program.
And I have self-taught myself some programming,
Okay.
a little bit of binary.
Okay.
Besides that, this is my first legitimate encounter with.
Legitimate encounter. Before this, it was all illegitimate children that you produced? Something like that. Well, thanks for coming, Blaze and Malachi. Wow. You don't really run into either one of those too often. The only Blaze, and that is your God-given name?
Yep, it is.
And how do you spell Blaze?
B-L-A-I-S-E.
Okay, all right. Because the only Blaze, I remember, now this is all, once again, going to be much older than you, but there used to be the American Gladiator show on TV, and there was one of the gladiators was Blaze. And that's the only Blaze I think I've ever met. And I didn't actually meet him. I mean, didn't hang out with the gladiators too often, but you know, Do you know the American Gladiator show? You do. Malachi knows. All right, so now that we're all formally introduced, and he and I were neighbors almost, so that was pretty funny. I'll talk about anything startup. So I can go through my deck. To be honest with you, it isn't all that fucking exciting. So I can really do whatever it is that you want to do, is what I would say. So throw questions at me. Why are you here? Because there's no free pizzas, so why are you here? Okay. I'll go through the deck. I'm going to go through the deck. That's what we're going to do. All right. So I hit the button. It didn't go anywhere. Oh. So first of all, I think it's good to define a startup, okay? Because this is one that really confuses people, actually. So anything that's an early stage technology entity that's trying to position itself for rapid growth. It's got to have rapid growth. It's got to have some element of technology. Now, we just made that a pretty broad statement right there, obviously. But there are all kinds, it comes in all kinds of flavors. Oh, there we go. So this is one that actually gets people really defensive. They actually get pretty angry about this when you talk to people. Because startups are sexy, small businesses not so sexy, right? So nobody wants to be called a small business anymore. They all want to be startups. They all want to go on Shark Tank and get picked apart by Mark Cuban. So, but there's a big difference between small businesses and startups. And what I tell people is, it's not a question of good and bad. It's not at all. It's just different, okay? Things like consulting firms, restaurants, dry cleaners, service-based businesses, those are small businesses. Now, you can have a really great life and have a small business. You really can. But that doesn't make you a startup. So if you're not building a new mousetrap, something that's different and dynamic, if you don't have some element of technology and you don't have a hockey stick, if you don't have a hockey stick in any of your growth plans, then you're not a startup. So everybody understand what I mean by the hockey stick? Yes. Well, this could be a measurement of all kinds of things. This could be revenues, could be users, could be engagements, interactions, but you got to have some kind of hockey stick. You got to go from not a whole lot to a whole mess load in a pretty quick fashion. If not, you're not a startup. Now, doesn't mean, as you probably all know, startups almost never work. So the only thing to qualify as a startup is that you can plausibly tell a story that this could happen. Doesn't mean it will happen, because if it did always happen, we'd all be a lot richer than we already are, because we would just, every time we'd win. And we almost never win, so that's the funny thing about this. But you at least have to be able to tell a plausible story that your business is going to do this. The guy that owns a restaurant, he doesn't get to tell this story, ever, because it's never going to do that for him. So, unless his model is maybe some kind of weird franchise thing, he's not going to pull that off. So, once again, doesn't make it good or good and bad, it just is, okay? Everybody, it's all about dreams. Whatever your dream is, that's the right dream. You want to start a game studio. You've started a game studio. That's your dream. That's what's most important. It doesn't really matter if it has this or not. I don't get to come in and say, hey, it's a startup or not. I love quick questions, or slow ones for that matter. I'm ready. I love that. Yep. Right. Sure. Yep. Mm-hmm. Probably not. Probably not. Right. 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 I'm not sure I would call it a startup by definition. Yeah, right, but see, and that's an important part, right? I want you to think, once again, that's the difference between good and bad. It's not a measurement of good and bad. I have friends who do not own startups, but make a whole bunch load of money at doing whatever it is that they love to do. The key thing is that one of the key things is that if there isn't, I mean, and when I talk about hockey stick, I talk about insane hockey stick. I'm talking about here's the real number. If you can't tell me how you're plausibly a $100 million business in the next 3 years, you're not a startup. Doesn't mean you'll do that, but if there is absolutely no opportunity for you to be a $100 million business in 3 years, you're not a startup. That's a key thing.
So pretty much in a small business, it's a guaranteed or nearly guaranteed way of getting a large, bigger numbers in a longer amount of time, whereas a startup is.
Think once again. Let's take some specific examples. The guy that has a really successful restaurant. I was sitting in one the other night. I was down in Tucson. Really wonderful restaurant. If you're ever down in Tucson, Poca Cosa, fantastic restaurant. It's been around a long time in Tucson. It's some of the best Mexican food anywhere you're going to find on the planet. Beautiful restaurant. She's still this though. She's been around for like 20 years, and she's still this because there's not much chance in her current business model and dream that she's probably I don't know, $7-8 million in revenue business. She might get 1 times multiple on it. So if she tried to sell it today, it might be worth $7 or $8 million. I can promise you, if we walked in the door and I gave any of you $7 or $8 million, you'd be ecstatic. And if you were doing something you really love, who cares, right? So that's the difference, though. Yes, ma'am. No, keep asking weird questions. I love weird questions. Okay.
I guess my other question then would be, would a lot of people then be in startups for the possibility of selling?
Yes.
Yeah.
By definition, you are only there.
The idea is like, I just want to start this business, it'll get really.
And get it, and what we, in the industry, we would call that an exit. We're playing for the exit. Doesn't necessarily make that good or bad, but it is what it is. Yes, ma'am.
You want to like be able to predict or kind of like hope that your business plan is going to
Yes.
start out real slow and then just take
Yes.
Okay.
That there is some.
Be able to project and have
Yeah, and be plausible about it. Right. There's no. Once again, going back to my little restaurant example, there was no example where she could say, "I have one restaurant in one building in one block area." And that's going to magically be a $100 million business because that's all her model is. So there's no plausible ability there. Forget about that. Once again, there's no technology involved and all those other things that sort of are disclaimers as well.
So then for like the startup community, is it typical for people to kind of start them up, sell them, and move on and start another one?
Yeah. I have this theory, and I've been at this a long, long time. So I'm older than dirt in this industry. So, but you really only have, we're all born with a startup gas tank, a startup founder gas tank. We all have it. And when that gas tank gets empty, you don't get to be a founder anymore. And you're usually done being a founder by the time you're 35 to 40. If you haven't figured out the startup founder thing by then and already had an exit, a good one, you don't get to do it. It's over. Just move on. So that's kind of how the game gets played. It's hard work, and most of the time you fail. Being a founder is something that you are almost guaranteed to fail at. Even the best people fail. I'm ready. I love the connection already.
I keep like having these introductions to my questions. But it sounds almost like you're saying like basically doing a startup or making a startup or whatever, it's like being in the honeymoon phase of your business. And then just like letting yourself be bought out before you actually get that up.
No, it's not quite like that. I mean, it's probably a little more complicated than that, I would say. All right. So how do you define a startup? You can define it by how many people work at it, how much money there is, and where it is. It's sort of customer acquisition. Early stage, building stage, growth phase, real company. This is if you were defining it by people. Got some numbers there for you to kind of look at. If you're defining it by money, this is how much money's been raised. So early stage, bootstrapped, or less than 100K raised. Once again, less than $1 million, less than 10 million, more than 10 million. The interesting thing about the startup world is that everybody sort of defines themselves a little differently. And everybody knows what Twitter is, right? So Twitter, for the first 3 or 4 years of its existence, had no concept of how it was going to make money. And candidly, it still struggles with figuring out how it's going to make money. And, but that hasn't stopped it from raising a bunch of money from investors and getting lots and lots of users, hundreds of millions of users. So sometimes you can get that hockey stick. If you remember our hockey stick, that hockey stick for Twitter is all about growth, not about revenue. Where for other companies, it's all about revenue and not about, you know, user growth. So it could all get defined differently. So we're talking about ecosystem here. Anybody understand the term angels or VCs? Okay, so I'll define them quickly for you. Angels are individual investors who make investments into startups. That's what angels are. And a VC, a venture capitalist, is somebody who is investing someone else's money into startups. That's the difference. So a venture capitalist takes money from other investors, pulls it together into a fund, and then invests it. And an angel is betting with their own money. That's the difference. Other than that, they act very, very similarly. So the startup ecosystem, this is an interesting thing. If you want to play in the startup world, the only place to play is to be a founder. If you don't want to be a founder at some point, don't work at startups. They pay poorly. They often are transient, meaning they may not be around for very long. So there's really, my friend, really good friend of mine, describes it as this way, is that the startup world is a pimp and hoe world. There are pimps and there are hoes. The pimps are the investors and the hoes are the founders. And that's all there is. Everybody else is noise and they don't really matter. So it's a straight pimp and hoe business. So if you're not going to be a founder or if you're not independently wealthy, then you don't want to play in the startup world. It just is, there are better ways for you to experience your life, your professional life. That's what I would say. The rest are all hanger-ons otherwise. I think my next slide. So as far as the Arizona startup ecosystem, interesting enough, none of you are really from Arizona. But you're here now. So Arizona in general, I break it down into 3 markets. If you count Flagstaff, Phoenix, and then Tucson. It's really 3 distinct markets. They're 2 hours away from each other, so everybody really treats them as, they might as well be separate states for all intents and purposes. And actually, there are people in each of those locations that really wish they were separate states, but that's a different political problem, not yours. But what I would say is that Arizona and all 3 of those markets in the startup world are what I would call tertiary markets. There are only 2 primary markets. There's the Bay Area, Silicon Valley, and there's New York City. 2 primary markets. There are 8 to 10, depending on how you want to count them, secondary markets. That would be places like Austin, um, Boulder, Boston, maybe Chicago. So not a lot of secondaries. It used to be Baltimore, and Baltimore still is as if you play in cyber. If you're in the cyberspace or you're biomed, Baltimore's still a good startup town. But, and I can tell you're from Baltimore when you say Baltimore. Going down the ocean, hon, drink some natty bows, eat some crabs. That Baltimore gave you away right there, man. Can't take that. I always say, I was actually on the ride over here, I was telling somebody, I said, you know, at the end of the day, I'm just a poor kid from Essex. That's really all I am. So, yeah, washing machine. My grandmother still says zinc. Put the dishes in the zinc. No, I know 100%. It's pretty funny, man. And as soon as you said Baltimore, it was a dead giveaway. Dundalk? Where in Dundalk were you born? Oh my God! So, my dad grew up on Kavanaugh.
Oh, really?
Yeah, yeah. Holy macaroni! It's like old home week here. Anyway, we digress. We went. You know, we did our own private conversation here. Thanks for coming, though. Lovely parting gift for you. What we. So the Arizona ecosystem is really a tertiary ecosystem. Now, I will say that I think Phoenix specifically, the greater Phoenix area, all of Phoenix, I look at it as one market, has some distinct advantages that I think can make it a secondary. Probably not a primary, but it can definitely make it a secondary market. It's a low cost of living. It's a boatload of students, Close proximity to the West Coast. These are good advantages that it has. The only thing it's really missing is a really light amount of talent, experienced founder talent. Nobody's really done it here, so there's not a lot of that. And there's almost no capital, almost none. There's very, very little capital, local capital. There's a couple angel groups, ATI, which is here, and Desert Angels, both of which are good groups, but that's all there is, really. There isn't much else floating around town. Most of the people who have money here made their money in real estate, and real estate guys don't tend to make bets in startups. It's just something very foreign to them, so it just feels funky. So, but that's kind of what the ecosystem is, but I think it's an emerging one. I think it'll be a great one. It's going to take another 5 to 10 years, but I think it has the potential to be great. That's why we set up shop here. We think we can be part of helping to grow it to be something special. So, oops, I think that's it. That is my last slide. So, question?
Oh, no, it's the last slide. Yeah.
Yay! It's Friday. So if you found this interesting, I think on November 16th we are having I believe it's some kind of workshop here on November 16th. It'll be right here on campus. You all have been prepared. You know, my partner in crime, Chris Ye, will be the speaker. He's actually much better than I am. So he's much smarter, that's for sure. So. Yeah, oh, I can. That's okay. I'm just a poor kid from Essex, man. That's at the end of the day. That's all I am. So, any other questions, thoughts, things for the good of the order?
So,
Yes, sir.
so I need to talk. You said it was Desert Angels.
There's Desert Angels and ATI. I don't think either one of them would touch you, though. That's the honest answer. You're too early, and they're probably not touching a game shop. You'd have to look outside.
Other products aren't far enough along yet.
Yeah, that's, I think. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, the game studio folks, there are probably some distinct people that look at those. There are a handful in the Bay Area that would probably take a serious look when you get to a certain place. That's where I would start if it was time to raise money. But more than likely, it's not time to raise money. So.
Yeah, we're keeping it low.
Yeah, right.
Mobile and working out of school.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
2 to 6 people, you're not making a AAA title.
No, right. Yeah.
Seeing if we can just make things on the side too.
Yep, 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 yep. I have a guy I know based in New Hampshire who he's got a little game studio he's trying to get rocking and rolling too. About the same size as yours. You know, I think he's got, you know, a handful of, you know, folks pumping out some stuff. So,
Because we don't have any like capital, the mobile things like that are to give us foundation.
right.
Hopefully
It's a low barrier to entry and yeah. Let me ask you a question. If I magically gave you how much? What's the magic number in your brain today?
the magic number in my brain
Yeah, that you need to raise.
is between, depending on what outlets we were going to go, is between 5 and 10 million.
5 and 10 million.
Between
Yeah, you got to get a lot more traction to get to that. That's my guess. Yeah. Yeah, I don't think you could ever raise 5 to 10 here. You'd have to be in the Bay Area.
But the like side project, because you could think of each game or each outlet as a different startup.
Sure.
So like the hardware stuff,
Yeah.
that's that may be on like 100K. Actually gets manufacturing stuff going,
Interesting.
things like that. Things with the VR,
Mm-hmm.
it's around the same price.
Mm-hmm.
But to get like a big game in the marketing and like anything like anywhere close to AAA
Of course.
outside of mobile and web,
Yeah, yeah.
is a couple million.
Yeah.
Unless you want to get a whole bunch of people working for free
Yeah.
on promises.
Yeah. Yeah. So you've got a game out now? That
We
you
have 9 applications and games on the market,
Okay. All mobile stuff?
all mobile. Because some of them are then a few business applications for mobile.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. I got somebody I want you to talk to. I'll give you a card. Drop me a line. I'll put you in touch with somebody. Might be an interesting conversation with you. One of our portfolio companies that's helped emerging game companies sort of get distribution. It's kind of what they do. So, but I'll let them tell you the story, not me. They're smarter than me too. So. Any other questions? Any more preamble questions that you want to bring up? Be fantastic. Okay. All right. Well, thanks for coming.